Started. I feel like James is going to be here probably any second now. But regardless, I just want to say welcome everyone for being here. And I'm just going to turn it over to Cheryl and Nabi, who have been heading the book club for me. Thank you both for all of your amazing work. And welcome to all of those. Hey, Christian, one of my friends is here. So good to see you. I'm just going to turn it over to you guys to introduce the book and get things going.
Thank you so much, Elisa. So welcome everybody to the book club. Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate everyone who comes out to talk to us about Pilates, health, fitness, and of course today, breath. Before we start, I would like to give a special thanks to Ryan, who helps us to coordinate everything on the technical Pilatesology side, and she's been such a great help in all of this process. And so this is a free meeting for all Pilates movement enthusiasts, geeks, fans, and it's sponsored by Pilatesology in partnership with Perspire, which is my company, Providence Pilates Center and Authentic Method Pilates. We hope you'll find fresh inspiration for your workouts and some rest and relaxation while reading and having fun connecting with our community. Our next book is My Enchanted Life by Lolita San Miguel. She will also be joining us on August 12th at 1 p.m. So if you would like to come and talk with Lolita, please join. You probably already know about Pilatesology if you're here for this book club, but for those who are not subscribers, it's an amazing resource for students and teachers where you can get unlimited streaming of classical Pilates for only $20 a month. If you have not already, I would highly recommend checking it out. And my software, Perspire, is a software created for Pilates teachers to help independent Pilates studios create amazing experience for their clients and thrive in the ever-changing wellness market. It's free to download and use, and I would love to personally give anybody a demo or walk them through if you're interested in learning about the software. Our moderator today is Cheryl. She is a Power Pilates master teacher trainer and has studied Pilates since 1999. She's the proud owner of Providence Pilates Center in Providence, Rhode Island, which opened its doors in 2001. And Cheryl had a stroke of genius to start the Pilates book club as another way for clients and teachers to connect over Pilates. And so today, running a little late is James Nestor, who has written for Outside, Scientific American, The Atlantic, Dwell, The New York Times, and many other publications. And we all just finished reading or know about his book, Breath, which is The Science of a Lost Art, which was released in 2020. And it was an instant New York Times bestseller. He's appeared on dozens of national television shows, including Nightline, CBS's Morning News, and on NPR, and he lives and breathes in San Francisco. So now I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to do some housekeeping.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our book club today. We are really excited to have James. I see that James is here. Nice to meet you, James. I'm Cheryl. I'm going to be the moderator today. I would love it if everybody could go on mute at the moment, except for James and myself. And we have, if you're not familiar with Zoom, somewhere, whether you're on a laptop or an iPad or an iPhone or a phone, there's an area for chat, and you can at any point chat in any questions. I will try to go as best I can in order. There will be times when I might say, can you whoever go off mute and we can ask the question personally. But just if you can stay on mute until that time, that would be super helpful. There's also a raise your hand function under the reactions. And that's a really good way to pop you up into the front of my screen so I know that you want to ask a question. So you can always use that function also. And we can get all your questions answered. So we really want to make this interactive as much as we can. So without further ado, James, hello, nice to meet you. How are you today?
Hi, thanks, and doing well. Sorry, I got some different input on what time to be here, so hopefully I'm not too late.
No, this is good. Perfect timing. Love it. So this is the Pilatesology community. I know that many of us are Pilates enthusiasts, whether we're instructors or students of Pilates, but I know there are some people on this Zoom meeting that are not necessarily Pilates enthusiasts. My husband's a fitness person and he's on this call. So, you know, I don't want to just make it specific to that genre. But we found this book so fascinating, and especially the fact that it came out in 2020, which seemed like such a pertinent time to have a book about breath come through our door. And I just wanted to start, I loved this book. It was so fun to read, easy to read. And the book starts with you taking a breathing class. It was for a technique called, and I'm probably gonna say it wrong, but Sudarshan Kriya. If I hope I said that right. I love your description of the physical reactions that took place in your own body as you experienced what felt like maybe an hour long. I'm not sure how long the class was exactly, but a class. It seemed like that was a pivotal moment for you. I'm not sure. Could you share a little bit about that class and experience and how it maybe got you to this place of research about this topic?
Sure. You know, that wasn't the thing that really made me decide I wanted to spend how many years writing and researching this book. It was one of many things, but it did get me more curious about how breathing worked. It's something that I never thought too much about and didn't really realize the true potential that breathing has for physical health, mental health, and more. And I got a little peek into that potential when I was at this breathing class, which I still do, by the way. I'm still in contact with my teacher there. I'm not religious about it. I don't do it all the time, but I mess around with it, you know, a few times a week. And it just made me realize that there's so much more to this seemingly mundane and simple task that we do 20,000 times a day. But just to be clear, again, that was not what convinced me to write a book. I didn't know that if anything, it confused me more than, and so I didn't know what to do. And so I just didn't really talk about it for a couple of years until I started researching with freedivers and started talking to pulmonologists, and a larger story emerged.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a free diver you wrote about that can hold their breath for 8 minutes, which just blows my mind because it's definitely not in my genre. There's a prominent theme throughout the book about how evolution has managed to change the shape of our skulls, the shape of our head, our palate, our sinuses, etc. And you know, I guess I always thought of evolution for the better, the survival of the fittest, but it seems like it's not for that. It's not for the better at the moment. You mentioned that long ago, like 300,000 years ago, teeth were straight, food was obviously different, and now our teeth are crooked, our mouths are smaller, etc. Do you think the trade-off was worth it? You know, I mean, can you speak a little bit into that in terms of how evolution has changed where we're at right now?
Yeah, there's no trade-off. So there's no benefit to having a mouth so small that your teeth no longer fit. There's no benefit to having lower back pain or asthma or diabetes or all these other chronic conditions that we're all saddled with right now.
Mm-hmm.
So where we get things wrong, where I got things wrong for decades about evolution, is I always assumed it meant survival of the fittest. We're getting stronger and better and taller and living longer. If that were true, why are diseases continuing to rise every single year? It doesn't make any sense. And when you start understanding that, you start understanding that life does not have a set goal point, right? Things aren't moving towards one specific destination. Evolution just means change over time. So think of evolution like, you know, a tree spreading outwards. Yeah, some species develop traits that are beneficial to their long-term survival. Others don't. The fact that chickens don't fly, is that really beneficial to them? I don't know. The fact that, you know, after all of this medical technology, we're starting to live shorter lives now and have longer disease spans. That's not survival of the fittest. So how does breathing fit into this? Breathing fits into it because our mouths, not 300,000 years ago, but 300 years ago, 400 years ago, we had straight teeth. And now 90% of us don't. So this change can happen very quickly. And with a mouth that's too small for your face, that can't accommodate your teeth, you're going to have a smaller airway. And that's one of the reasons why so many of us are contending with chronic respiratory issues.
And so I want to go back to the freediver question in a minute. There's one in the chat, but I think about, there's a part in the book, more into the book, where you met with the orthodontist, dentist, John Mew is one of them. And it was, I don't know, relevant to me. I have a 12-year-old who now has, you know, metal on the bottom, palate on the top, braces here, is that it almost seemed, you know, there was some orthodontic work that was contraindicated to better breathing. And I don't know about future orthodontic work or current orthodontic work, if it's better for breathing or not, but does that, I'm assuming that's going to change our breathing patterns when we have dental stuff going on, right?
It's a very thorny area right here. I'll just explain as an objective journalist what I found by talking with so many researchers in the field over years and years. And that is, just imagine with me, you have a mouth, okay? And the mouth is so small that the teeth no longer fit. They're growing in crooked. So teeth will grow in straight if they have a large mouth to grow into. That's just how it works. So this mouth is getting smaller. So our approach to it in just the last 80 or so years is to take out teeth and then take the remaining teeth and crunch them in with braces and headgear and all the stuff that I grew up wearing, right? What is going to happen to that mouth that was already too small for its teeth when you remove teeth and then start bending a mouth even smaller when a kid is developing? What's that going to do to their profile, their facial structure? I'll leave the answer up to you. I don't want to tell you what that might do, but all I will say, I've been talking to a lot of dental conferences and a lot of dentists who were like, duh, we've been telling people this for 40 years. So there's this huge sea change going on in dentistry right now. And in 10 years, I'll quote Dr. Michael Gelb, who's been in the field for about 50 years. He said, we're going to look back at what we've done and be horrified. And I believe that's true.
Someone, maybe Tara has a response, I think, to this. Tara, can you go off mute and share what you wrote on the chat?
Okay, sure. I'm keeping my camera off for now since my dog is wandering around doing some funny things. You might hear it as well. But yeah, I've been on my own journey with all this as well over the past couple of years. Long story short, I recently got this crazy diagnosis of a very rare TMJ disease, and I'm going to need my TMJ surgically replaced. But along this journey, I did a Zoom consult with Dr. Evans, who is featured in the book, big fan of hers. And James, I'm just curious why you chose the homeoblock versus perhaps working with Dr. Evans or some of these other doctors who you researched and spoke with.
Yeah, great question. I did not choose it. It was there, and I thought this looks interesting. I want to put this guy's claims to see if they actually work. And I got a CAT scan before and after. Ted Belfour, he's the inventor of the homeoblock. All these devices basically do the same thing, and I'll back up a bit for people who don't know what I'm talking about. The vast majority of us have an upper palate that goes in instead of out. If you have a clean thumb, no COVID thumbs, please, you can place it inside of your mouth. And if you feel a big indentation, right, you have something called a V-shaped arch or a high arch palate. Our ancestors did not have this. Other animals do not have this. What happens when the mouth doesn't develop properly in childhood is it starts pushing up. This is why our mouths are narrower. This is why our faces are narrower than our ancestors. That arch pushes up into the sinus cavities, right? This makes it harder to breathe through the nose. So you become a mouth breather. And if you do that for long enough, that will change the skeleton of your face. It will actually change your profile. This is not controversial. Okay, this stuff isn't. What is controversial is the next thing I'm going to mention here is some people have developed different strategies to expand that upper palate. And by doing so, they can have teeth grow and straighten and also open up the airways. This is much easier to do in childhood when a kid is developing. And I've seen the results from this, and it's astonishing how well it works. In adulthood, it's much harder. So I wanted to put these claims to the test. So I was offered a homeo block. I thought it was totally sketchy, but I said, well, I won't rely on my own attitude for this. I'll rely on data and numbers and scans and science. And that's what I did. And it completely transformed my airways. So to answer your question, the short version is, I think I could have used a dozen different devices that would have done the same thing. Dr. Evans does incredible work. She also is more interested in doing surgical implants in the roof of the mouth. I was less into that at the time. So I opted for this retainer.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara, for the question. Elisa had a question about the free divers, if we can go back to that for 1 second. It says the question was, free divers and swimmers, they mouth breathe, but seem to have good health. Do you have any thoughts on that, on a sport or any kind of activity where people are needing to breathe through their mouth on a regular basis, but they're still in really good health?
Yeah, I tried to make this clear in the book, and in all of the other editions, I put footnotes, I put bolded copy, and in the paperback edition, I'm just gonna maybe bold and put a huge box in there to make it very, very clear. And what I was trying to explain is I'm talking about habitual breathing. So habitual breathing should be through the nose, in and out through the nose, okay? If people are taking a breath through their mouth, like I just did right there, if you're laughing, you're breathing through the mouth. If you're sighing, you're breathing through the mouth. Some pranayamas have you go, all of this is perfectly fine because you do that for a little bit and then you go back to your habitual nasal breathing. So if a free diver, before a free diver takes a huge dive, does a and that is perfectly fine. But I can tell you from being in the freediving community and being a freediver myself, the rest of the time, these people are breathing through their noses and they're breathing slow and light. So even in certain states of athletic performance into zone 4, zone 5, when you're really plugging away, your heart rate's racing, it's fine to default into mouth breathing for a little bit. This is totally fine, as long as your habit, your default is nasal breathing.
Okay, awesome, thank you. There's another question about Ann Kearney. Did she finish her study at Stanford yet? You mentioned that she was doing one.
I just talked to Ann a couple of weeks ago. Amazing researcher. She is booting it up. She just got funding to do it. You have no idea how hard it is to do studies in breathing where no one will make any money from anything that you're studying. And she proved that because it took her years and years. She got a private funder to fund this study of 200 people looking into nasal breathing, sleep apnea, and snoring. And this is going to be a long study. I think it's going to be a couple years long, but I'm so excited that someone's actually able to do this with a large scale study. So more to come on that. Whenever the results come out, I will of course be blasting it out through any means.
Now, if we could go back to the themes of the book, you made some what I would consider like pretty remarkable claims that breathing correctly can, I took a quote, jumpstart athletic performance, help with ADD, ADHD, anxiety, autoimmune diseases, and even correct scoliosis. So as many of us that are PLIS instructors, like spinal health and spinal posture and correcting things like that are very important to us. So I mean, those are to me remarkable claims. Can you speak a little bit into that?
Yeah, and you should be calling BS on all of them. But then go look at the science. So I'll start with scoliosis because this seems like the craziest one, right?
Yeah,
Just look at the work of Katarina Schroth, who allowed people to do something called orthopedic breathing, which was stretching and breathing into one lung and breathing to the other. She straightened her own scoliotic spine, breathing this way, and then taught this to hundreds and hundreds of people. And you shouldn't believe me if there weren't pictures, if there wasn't science, and if this wasn't still being used at Johns Hopkins. And there's still a Schroth school in Austria and in Germany. So these claims seem outrageous, but before you dismiss them, or because I certainly dismissed them when I first heard them, you really look at the science here. If we're talking about autoimmune diseases, the work that Wim Hof is doing, the 100 independent studies, some of which that were conducted at Harvard and Yale and Columbia, looking into Sudarshan Kriya and its effect on autoimmune diseases, it's all right there. And some of these studies have been around for dozens and dozens of years, even for decades. So for more mild ailments like asthma and emphysema, we've known this for decades, literally for decades. There are dozens and dozens of clinical trials conducted at hospitals showing that breathing alone can be such a successful intervention for helping to reverse asthma. Am I going to say it's going to work for everyone all the time? No, but for the majority of people, they will see some significant improvements. So I didn't believe this stuff either, which is why I included all of the references on my website for free for anyone, including interviews with professors at Harvard and other leaders in the field that are available for everyone to listen to.
Thank you. I know Elisa just wrote to everyone in the chat that our teacher on Pilatesology, Sanjay Mayo, is I feel like I'm going to say it wrong, Scroth method practitioner, and you can see her video. There's a video that she does, and I know even I'm in New England, I'm in Rhode Island. There's a woman in Boston area that I know practices and teaches that method. And I don't know if my husband actually was asthmatic and suffering from some severe asthma, and studied your book during when it first came out, read it, practiced it. I watched him doing these weird breathing techniques in the living room one day. I was like, what are you doing? And slept with the tape on his mouth. And he would say that he has cured his asthma. He hasn't used an inhaler since then. So I don't know, Larry, if you're on, but you can speak into that maybe if you are. Also being said, Elisa wondered if there is a place that we can follow you, James. I know you have a Facebook group because I've joined it. It's just the Breath group, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, so people kept writing me. I was getting hundreds and hundreds of emails, which I don't have the capacity, or I should not be answering medical questions. So I created a Facebook group. Anyone can join. I don't really monitor it too closely. I've kind of let it out into the wild. So please excuse if people are posting a bunch of stuff on there. I just do not have the capacity to monitor it, but I am continuing to do these Q&As with pulmonologists and with psychiatrists and with other breathing experts or people interested in breathing on. And I'm just posting, I take questions from readers and I ask the experts these questions instead of, I'm just a filter. I'm a journalist, right? I take information from experts and I put it into language that I hope other people can understand. So that's
I noticed on your website, you have a number of videos with the experts doing the video of the different breathing techniques and different themes that you had talked about, right?
Yep, they're the experts. They're the ones who have been studying this for decades and decades. And I just collected their stories and the science.
And Elisa also asked, what practice do you use regularly now? Do you stick to a specific breathing technique now on a regular basis as your own practice?
Well, people think that since I wrote a book on breathing, I'm now like some master breather, which that is not my role here. But you can't help picking up a few tricks along the way. When you see people overcome panic and overcome asthma and even overcome some mild forms of emphysema, fix their posture, improve their athletic performance, you can't help but wanting to adopt some of these techniques. So I do breathing techniques, Sudarshan Kriya. I do Wim Hof method when I can. I'm not too religious about it. But most importantly, I breathe through my nose all the time, whether I'm surfing or whether I'm working or whether I'm walking. And that to me is the most important thing. After that, you can then start improving your breathing, incorporating different techniques. But you would be so amazed how few people are obligate nasal breathers. And you would be so amazed what a difference that can make to someone's health, just the pathway through which you breathe.
How long do you think it takes to see the change? Like, if you've not been doing that and suddenly you're like, I'm going to be diligent, I'm going to tape my mouth at night, I'm going to really focus on this. Do you see a time, approximately how long on average?
Everybody's different. I could never say, oh, 2 days and you're good to go. Some
Right.
people it's 2 months, some people it's 2
Yeah.
weeks, some people it's much longer than that.
Mhm.
The one thing that's interesting is living in this day of wearables is, and I think it's great, by the way, is you can put on a heart rate variability monitor. You can
Mhm.
look at your blood pressure. You can look at your just heart rate, and you can watch how after a few seconds of changing your breathing, your whole body starts to shift. And especially with sleep quality, I was lucky enough to just be talking with Matthew Walker. I don't know if you know his book, Why We Sleep. It was out about 4 years ago, but he is a sleep scientist at UC Berkeley. And, these things that we've all assumed were so simple and we didn't need to focus on can just have such a huge impact on our health. And breathing at night, I think, is where people will see the quickest results. Because if you're a mouth breather, if you're snoring, if you have some forms of sleep apnea, I have seen, and as have so many other researchers, real researchers, that these things can be reversed just by switching the pathway through which you breathe. Again, I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody all the time, but you will only celebrate and benefits by improving your breathing. There's no downside to it.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked if you're continuing to do research for part 2. Is there a breath part 2?
No, there's definitely not a breath part 2. I can't help but, science is not a closed book. Even when you've closed the book on it, I did all I could in the amount of time that I could spend on this subject. But, it's a bit ironic that in the past year, I've learned so much new stuff. And the great thing is I've been able to speak at Harvard Medical School and Stanford and Yale. And so I'm now in contact with these very influential researchers who want to conduct more scientific studies into this stuff, which is so exciting. So I'm just doing that as my, on my off hours, trying to help that along. I'm not writing about it or anything. It's just a subject I'm still so fascinated with, because it just seems to keep growing and growing, all the things that we can learn about it, all the benefits associated with it.
It's amazing, right? Okay, Yolanda's question is, beginning part is specific to Pilates, but she learned an exercise called elephant years ago, and she remembers being told to keep the mouth closed, teeth touching, and tongue on the roof of the mouth. And she remembers that there was a little bit about that in the book. Can James talk about what that position does to the body? I believe that was the part about the oral posture that you talked about, right?
So this is classic stuff, because this is what I kept finding when I was researching. And it almost got maddening that one culture would develop something, they would find it would work incredibly well, they'd give it this title, it would kind of be lost. Another culture at a different time would find the same exact thing, they give it a different title, it would be lost. This kept going on with every subject I was looking at. So you see this in Chinese medicine, you see this in Hindu medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. You see it in Pilates now too. So this is the natural way that we should be holding our oral posture. Is our teeth should almost be touching. There should be a teeny bit of space between them. Tongue at the roof of the mouth, the tip of the tongue just at the back of the front teeth. And you're going to notice when you hold your mouth this way, your tongue this way, you can breathe through your nose, right? Now open your mouth up and feel what happens to your tongue when you open your mouth up. The tongue will rock back into the throat, which will make your airway smaller. So if you are developing, if you're a kid and you're constantly like this, which you see this with kids all the time, 50% of kids are going to be like this. This is how your face is going to grow. So you're actually going to inhibit your ability to breathe later on in life just by holding your mouth open. But if your mouth is closed and if your tongue is on the roof of your mouth, your face will develop in this form, right? You will actually influence how your profile will look. So this is, again, not controversial stuff. We've known it for a long time, and yet you still don't see a lot of education around this. I guess moms have been saying this for like hundreds of years, right? Stand up straight and shut your mouth. Maybe that's good advice.
That's where it comes from. Somebody asked if you could just clarify. With this, you mean top and bottom teeth trying to touch, but what if there's an overbite? What do you do if you're like, just you can't get that to touch?
Yeah, well, a lot of people have overbites or underbites or like you name it, like that's 90% of the population. So you do the best you can. So your teeth shouldn't, a lot of people when they do this as Westerners will just go, yeah, really feel the difference. This is awesome. No, this stuff should be done gently and lightly. So the teeth should almost be touching, right? Just relax your mouth, but not like this. Almost be touching, tongue at the roof of the mouth, just slightly. You can see videos on this. It's funny that the Muse got famous for this oral posture, even though people have been talking about this for so many years, that this is the proper way of holding your mouth. And if you look at our ancestors, so you may be thinking, well, how do we know our ancestors were holding their mouth like this? So this is a new factoid, not in the book, but about 40 to 50% of our profile and our airway is epigenetic. So it's constructed by the inputs in the environment, not just genetics. So we know that our ancestors were nasal breathers because they all had this same jaw, this prognathic facial growth, these wide airways. We know that from the skeletal record, which is fascinating that they certainly were onto this stuff, and we have since forgotten so much of it.
I've also seen you in some interviews I've watched where if you talk about, iPhone, iPad, whatever, we're all in this position with our head and our neck. I'm going to assume that that's going to also, not just the jaw, but from the airway down, having a negative effect.
Yeah, it is. And this is another thing that the Muse mentioned is so many of us have gotten into this posture because our airways are so compromised. If you think of someone who's doing CPR, what's the first thing they do? They take the hand at the back of the head, crane the neck out to open the airway. If a lot of people who suffer from severe obesity, you'll see that their necks are craned out like this. Even weightlifters, because they have too many muscles there and their airways aren't developed, they have that posture. But you see it all. Look, next time you're on a flight, or next time you're at an airport or on a subway, you just see this has become the default posture, right? And
yeah,
I mean, you guys know, as people interested in structural alignment of the body, when your neck is out like this, the spinal column's all messed up. You're pulling the nerves here. This creates migraine head. I mean, it's a whole cascading effect of bad news. But breathing,
absolutely. Molly Renshaw, do you want to come on and ask your question? She had a question related to Pilates, but with breath. I don't know, Molly, if you're here. Oh, there she is. Can you go off mute? There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Molly. Yeah, you're good.
So I had a question about the movement of the rib cage when you breathe. We were taught some in Pilates where you're not really supposed to move your rib cage very much when you inhale, like the front of your ribs, and you're supposed to breathe more in your back while keeping your stomach really pulled in. And that always seemed kind of impossible, but we've been trying for years, and just wondering if that makes sense to you.
well, different techniques are used for different purposes. And what I learned from Elisa, who's a real specialist in breathing and posture, is that when we breathe, if you take your hands right now like this and place them on top of your hip bones, take a breath in. A lot of people think healthy breathing is just sticking the stomach in and out. I can do that without even breathing, right? Anyone who's done Kundalini for long enough. Healthy breathing is really about feeling the lateral movement of those hands go out and come back in. So when you breathe this way, and you feel the hands going out, that is showing you that you're engaging your diaphragm, which is so essential to be using in every breath you take. So as far as the ribs moving, what you're going to see with people who have dysfunctional breathing or breathing paradoxically is their rib cages might be moving, their shoulders might be moving. Every breath is like this. Breathing should be at rest, basically imperceptible. You shouldn't be able to see someone breathing across the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you feel your own body as you're breathing, there should be a slight movement that goes out and in. A lot of us are thinking breathing's all about up and down, right? But Elisa has said it's about out and in, and that's really engaging your diaphragm. And the diaphragm, another thing I've learned that's not in the book that will be in the next edition, if I'm able to figure out a way of getting it in there, is the diaphragm is also the primary pump for lymph fluid. So without that diaphragmatic movement, lymph fluid can sit and coagulate, and you don't want that to happen. You want all the fluids in the body to always be moving. So there's so many reasons to be engaging that diaphragm.
I feel like this is a lead in. Also, there's a question again from Tara that have you met with any Postural Restoration Institute therapists that also work on the premise that breathing and the diaphragm are key to everything? So have you had any research within that? I think you kind of spoke into it, but if there's any more from that.
I've spoken with the Feldenkrais people quite a bit. They're very into breathing. But Elisa has written 3 books on all the structure, the biomechanics of breathing. She doesn't do biochemistry. She's the first person to admit that, but the biomechanics of breathing. So I personally have not worked with anyone with my breathing and my structure. I am trying to do that on my own. It might be helpful to do that at some time. If that was the question, I'm not quite sure.
Tara, I don't know, Tara, did you want to, was there something that I missed? Did that talk into that? Oh, she said thank you, yes. Elisa, I don't know if you want to ask your question about the chewing, because it sounds like you could speak into that.
Yes, James, I have a dentist who talks about wanting us to chew this way as opposed to this way, like you would see a camel or a cow chew. I should be doing it with the bottom jaw. He believes that our jaw is meant to chew like that. Did you come across anything?
Well, yeah, that makes sense to me. You know, a lot of us think of chewing, we think of all of our teeth, but that's not how we really chew. If you think of chewing a carrot or a piece of celery, you're chewing on the back molars here, right? You're not chewing on the front of your teeth. That's just for ripping things out. So the way that I was taught that the most benefits to come with chewing are you're grinding up and down. I don't know anyone that chews like a camel. I don't think I do, but that sounds like it wouldn't be too good on the TMJ up there if you're constantly doing that with your mouth.
According to this dentist, pretty much everyone who doesn't have their teeth perfectly aligned straight is chewing that way in a subtle way.
That's very interesting. Yeah. That is the first I've heard about that. I'd love to know more about it. I was talking with Sharon Moore, who's a real expert in this subject. And again, chewing is not just beneficial for airway health. We have this big muscle tube, cartilage tube, right, which is our airway, and it can get flabby. And chewing helps to tone that up. And it's just so few of us chew anything nowadays, even health nuts, you know, just aren't chewing too much. And it's not good. You can actually improve blood flow to the brain and drain sinuses and use station tubes by chewing. We're meant to be chewing for a couple hours a day.
Mm-hmm. Related to that, did you come across any evidence of reasons to not say drink through a straw because you're inhaling a bunch of air, or anything like that?
Have not heard that one. Breathing through a straw can actually be a great exercise to do. I don't know if any of you saw this, got so much press last week and the week before, This 5 minutes of breathing lowers blood pressure more effectively than any exercise or medication. And what this is inspiratory muscle training. And I know that your group focuses a lot on this. We have 11 pounds of muscles in the respiratory system, and we're not ever working those out. But by working those out, the body can come into balance and work so much more effectively. So I mentioned the straw thing because what inspiratory muscle training is it's breathing resistance. You can buy a gizmo on Amazon, but they used to train people, runners, to just breathe through a straw. I know some of you may be aghast. It's mouth breathing for an exercise for 5 minutes a day. It doesn't matter. It's totally fine.
Someone asked if, in regards to the chewing is good for us. We should be chewing. Should we chew gum? I mean, I know when I was on a kick with chewing gum too much, my TMJ got worse. So I don't know. Do you have anything thoughts about that, to force yourself to chew?
This is a tangled web here. So for people with TMJ issues, this can exacerbate and cause further problems. You should not be chewing hard stuff. For our ancestors who, from what we can see, did not have TMJ issues, and for anyone who does not have TMJ issues, chewing has so many benefits, including chewing gum. Has a lot of benefits to actually build new facial bone. Who knew we could do that in middle age? I saw that in the CAT scans. I grew an incredible amount of bone in my face by chewing and wearing this palatal expander. So I should say that there are caveats with all of this stuff. And I do want to mention, I don't want to draw any conclusions for you. You can draw your own conclusions, but it's curious that with orthodontics being the way they've been for the past 70 years or so, just imagine what's going to happen when you're wearing a device that cranes your jaw back and your mouth back and puts the TMJ bones out of alignment. So I don't think it's a coincidence that, and this is not, I'm not saying this is a fact, this is just a hypothesis. It's peculiar to me that so many people who have had braces and headgear, now every time they open their mouth, they hear a popping sound in their ears, or they have TMJ issues. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot more research coming out about this, about how these problems likely had not existed before, but through our modern techniques have created a lot of issues for us.
Mm. Thank you. Constanza Alankeo, she's here from Chile, which is very cool. Constanza, do you want to come on? She had a really good question. She's also, thank you so much for this book. She's a dentist and health educator, Pilates teacher. I don't know if she's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, go ahead, Constanza.
First of all, I'm just so excited to be here. I actually, because I'm in Chile, far away, Amazon took so long. So I have the Spanish version of your book. If you haven't seen it, I have it. It's right here.
All right.
And it couldn't come in a better time. I mean, I'm a dentist. I don't practice anymore. I am a Pilates trainer, health educator. I work as a health coach. I'm having a lot of head and neck patients, a lot of post-COVID people that need a lot of help for breathing. So much to do there. So I was wondering, do you know any formal place where you can continue education? I know there's so many courses that you can take about breathing, but if I would like to train myself a bit more formally and would like to incorporate that into my professional whereabouts every day, do you know any place, or is there any, I will call it, serious place where I could learn? It's just when I read your book, I was just so excited, but I also got a little concerned that it might happen the same thing that happened with things like bath breathing or going to the woods, and now I have to pay $10,000 for a certificate to go into the forest. So is there anyone you can recommend, or any further education? That will be amazing.
Sure. So there's a whole new group that just started up in the past 6 months called Stasis. And they're a group of doctors that kept seeing dysfunctional breathing in every single one of their COVID patients. And so they started drawing these connections. They said, maybe these people are suffering from such severe symptoms of COVID, maybe breathing could be tied to it. Of course it is, but they just were there in the clinics, had not a lot of interest or experience with breathing. They just saw this and now we're doing something about it. So that's one program. I can speak very highly of the work that Patrick McEwen is doing. He offers video, I guess with conferences, I guess you could call them, or video training. It's very affordable. He is someone who 20 years ago had severe asthma, severe sleep apnea, severe allergies. His health was deteriorating. He figured out his breathing and now doesn't have any of those problems, and has taught tens of thousands of asthmatics to reverse their asthma. So Anders Olsen, my partner in Nasal Crime at the beginning of the book, is also great. His school is conscious breathing. So I would check out those three, and they all offer very affordable video schooling. So check it out.
Awesome. Thank you, Costanza, for the question. Daniela Mato, you have your hand up. Can you go off mute? And I think this is a really great question that you just wrote in. Hi, Daniela. Oh, there's the newborn.
Hi. So I have a newborn. This is Graham. And Graham uses a pacifier. And there's a lot of information out there on how to choose what pacifier is most appropriate for babies. And it seems to be common understanding that doctors and hospitals are recommending these thin cylindrical pacifiers that are very narrow, very thin, and seem to narrow and raise the palate. So I just it doesn't make sense to me why they would recommend such a pacifier when there are flatter, more wide pacifiers out there that would, like you're talking about, help to encourage the palate to spread, the teeth to come in a way that makes more sense, and that therefore they're not causing problems for the airways. So I don't know if you know anything about pacifiers or why this has become such a common thing, but it doesn't seem like it would be developmentally helpful for both breathing and development of the palate and teeth.
Great question.
From what I know, which isn't a ton about this subject, but I was just talking to Dr. Kevin Boyd about this recently, and he is an expert in this. He's a pediatric dentist and has been studying this stuff for decades and decades. But I would check out the science about non-nutritive sucking. That's what pacifier, that's the scientific term for it. No pacifier is beneficial for facial growth. And this is what Boyd has told me. So past about a few months, even after 6 months, they found that it is not helpful. And people may be thinking, well, that doesn't make sense, but there's a big difference between breastfeeding and pacifier and bottle feeding on the muscles and coordination it takes for each of those. So I'm a dude. The last thing I'm going to be talking about is breastfeeding and bottle. It's not going to happen, but I've been lucky enough to talk to some real leaders in the field about this. But I would explore the science, and you can just look this up on PubMed, which is the clearinghouse for every scientific study through the NIH about pacifiers and growth. But Kevin says not a good idea.
Okay.
Not my terms; those are his.
Okay.
You can go beat him up, but I'm guilt free on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela, for that question. There's another question about, could you speak more about building new facial bone? This person said, I'm in some groups on Facebook with pulmonologists, and many are skeptical that adults can grow new facial bone. It's to my understanding that you had a CT scan that actually showed growth of your facial bone, correct?
Yeah, isn't this great?
Yeah.
So I didn't believe it either, even though I saw more than 24 case studies with x-rays a year after, 2 years after, 3 years after. I don't know what to tell you. My results were analyzed at the Mayo Clinic, which is a pretty prestigious medical institution here. And they calculated the bone mass. And I got about 4 or 5 pennies worth of bone mass added to my face. What was interesting is, like, after about a month of wearing the Homeo block and chewing, everyone was saying, they were just like, dude, you look different. And where I hadn't seen relatives for a few months, they were just like, so they can believe whatever they want, or they can look at data and they can look at numbers, and then we can have a conversation about it. But until people actually want to look at objective scans and data and numbers, there's no convincing anyone should feel obligated to do.
Great. Going back to the pacifier question, somebody asked about thumb sucking. So I know my brother, for example, was a chronic thumb sucker. So how does that affect anything? So
Terrible, absolutely awful. Because if you think about it, when you're sucking on a thumb or you're sucking on a pacifier, you're focusing all of that energy to one point. If you do that for long enough, it will really mess up your mouth. If you want to see something not pretty, just, you know, long-term thumb sucking on Google Images, and you'll see what it does. But it's a disaster. You know,
sounds like we need to put mittens on those thumb sucking children.
And, you know, with the pacifier stuff, I wish I had more information on it. But a lot of people think a pacifier is normal until 2 years old, but that is not the case. You know, in infancy at certain times, it can be fine, but for long-term use, there's no advantage to having it. Maybe there's some new MIT researcher, scientist who's developed the pacifier that's going to expand the palate, but until I see that, I would be a little wary.
Sue asked a question about, she's recently taken up the Buteyko breathing, which puts focus on CO2. Are there other breathing techniques that focus on changing the chemistry of the body as much as the Buteyko method appears to do?
You could call it Buteyko, you could call it pranayama, you could call it yoga. It's all the same thing. So they're all doing such similar things. The difference with Buteyko is that was his metric of change and improvement, was the biochemistry, an objective marker. It's not all about CO2. CO2 is very important, but it also depends on your posture, right? Just having your CO2 right, but if you're hunched over like this all the time, you're not going to really celebrate the benefits of breathing. Having said that, the Buteyko methods, exhaling longer, breathing through the nose, restricting your breath when you feel an asthma attack coming on, all of those things are rock solid. They work incredibly well. It's just he was doing his research in the 50s. Well, it's 70 years later and we have more information now.
Okay. And I want to be very, very aware of time here. So as we kind of round out towards our hour, Maureen asked, I love this kind of question, what's your short spiel to convince a mouth breather to breathe through their nose? Do you have anything that we can quickly convince somebody with, or try to convince?
It depends what age they are. So I've been speaking at a lot of schools, which has been really fun, talking to kids. And the way you get it through to a teenager is, because a lot of teenagers are starting to get pretty vain, is you say, well, you can show them a picture of a mouth breather of Napoleon Dynamite, which is a classic one, where he's like that, or show them a picture of someone who's a nasal breather, and you say, how do you want to look? You know, which person's going to be more popular? And so you can kind of bait them on the vanity angle, because it will absolutely influence how your face will look. So for other people that aren't so vain, it comes down to health. So once you understand the difference between these things, there's no reason to be breathing out of your mouth. There's absolutely no reason from a biochemical standpoint, to a posture standpoint, to an aesthetic standpoint. And it's once people actually convert and they feel that difference, they see that difference, that's where people get convinced. But I want to be clear, it's not my role to convince people of anything. I don't want to be an evangelist for any of this stuff. I'm just trying to be a reporter and reporting what I've found.
Awesome, thank you. Someone else has asked that there's not going to be a breath 2. Are you doing research on any other topic that would be up and coming James Nestor topic?
I've been trying to do some research on sleeping more and surfing a lot more, and which is why I'm up here in Inverness and north of San Francisco right now. But this last year has been quite a doozy for so many reasons. And I'm trying to reset right now. I'm going on a European tour, fingers crossed, for a couple of months in fall, which is great. And I probably shouldn't be talking about this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. We're in pre-development on a mini-series that will be based on a lot of these things we're talking about, how humans have moved from the state of nature and how most of the problems we're dealing with are problems of our own makings. So, and I'm going down to LA next week to work on that a little bit. In Hollywood things, I mean, a green light's a yellow light, a yellow light's a red light. So who knows what's going to happen? I'm fully cognizant of that, but I can still daydream right now. It would be a great excuse to go out into the field for another year, meet up with these people again, and get the story out to people who don't read books, which is about 95% of the population. So we'll see what happens.
Yes. Vivian wrote, sounds a lot like Joseph Pilates going back to life, which is amazing. I wanna take the time to tell everyone, thank you. I apologize if I didn't get through the chat to everybody. I've been following the thread. I think everyone can follow the chat. There's been some awesome responses back to some of the questions that have been here. And I want to thank James for taking the time to spend, for me, it's the afternoon here in Rhode Island, the hour to share your insights with us. I think it's just so valuable. And from again, a movement specialist standpoint, many of us are the movement specialists that focus on breath and breathing and posture, spinal posture, head posture, neck posture. Now we can talk about oral posture. It's just so pertinent to where we are right now, particularly coming out of 2020. So I'd like to thank you so much for taking that time, and thank everyone for joining us here with Pilatesology. And I don't know, do you have any parting words, James?
No, Daniela has inspired me. The next expert Q&A I'll do will be on infant breathing, and I will ask an actual expert about all this. And so she can hear it straight from the horses or the expert's mouth. So that'll be the next one I'll set up. But thanks a lot. Great questions, everybody.
Thank you. And you can find more information on your website. Can you give us the website title?
Yeah, all of this, and there's is on mrjamesnestor.com. There are video interviews with a professor at Harvard talking about infant breathing, the difference between bottle feeding and breastfeeding, so you can hear him. All of it's for free. All of the scientific references are available with videos and breathing instruction too. I'm also trying to get better at this social media thing, which is hard for someone in middle age. But my Instagram account, Mr. James Nestor, I'm only posting things that has to do with breathing and science. So no puppy dogs, even though I've got a very cute dog sleeping back there. He will not be showing up in my Instagram feed, I promise you.
I don't know, my cat shows up quite a bit. Yeah. And the Facebook group was Breath, and you'll see, I believe it's a picture of the book for that Facebook group, and someone will admit you in once you try to sign on. And Elisa wanted everyone to know we will be putting the replay up on the book club page later tonight, so you can rewatch, share with your friends. And once again, thank you everybody for coming, and I hope to see you all at book club next month in August. Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you, James. Great to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.